You know that awful feeling? You apply for a job, you feel like you absolutely nailed the interview, maybe you're even overqualified.
Hmm.
You walk out feeling great, thinking this is it, and then, bam, just an email. Not found suitable.
Yeah, no explanation, nothing.
Exactly, just that. Yeah, super frustrating,
Yeah.
right, on a personal level.
Totally. But imagine that happening like the vast majority of the time. We're talking maybe 70% of the time.
70%.
Yeah. And allegedly, this is happening disproportionately to teachers from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities, specifically at Delhi University.
Okay, so this isn't just a few isolated cases we're talking about.
No, not at all. This actually came to a head just yesterday, April 11th, 2025. Some teachers shared their experiences directly with the Parliamentary Committee on the Welfare of Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes.
Right, I saw reports about that meeting, and they're pointing fingers at these labels, specifically not found suitable, NFS, and another one, no candidate shortlisted, or NCS.
Exactly, especially for the more senior roles like associate professor and professor. The allegation is these tags are being used, well, systematically to block SCST candidates.
And it wasn't just a couple of people speaking up, was it?
No, it was significant. We're talking nearly 80 individuals, teachers, students, even non-teaching staff, all from SCST backgrounds.
80 people. Wow.
Yeah, presenting their case to about 20 members of parliament. That volume, it suggests something bigger is going on, something potentially systemic within DU's processes.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. This not found suitable label first. NFS. It sounds deliberately vague.
It really does. I mean, think about it. A rejection. Zero feedback given, and apparently no real way to appeal it or even understand why.
It's like a dead end.
Pretty much. And the Democratic Teachers Front, the DTF, they've been quite vocal about this. They're the ones pointing to this really alarming frequency, specifically against SCST candidates.
And they're the source of that 70% figure.
That's what they're claiming, yes. A staggering 70% of SCST teachers facing denial, either for promotions or even getting hired in the first place, all down to NFS or NCS.
Just pause on that number. 7 out of 10, if that's accurate. That can't just be coincidence, can it?
That's precisely the argument. It seems statistically, well, improbable, doesn't it? It suggests something more deliberate might be happening. Mithiraj Dusia, he's the DTF Joint Secretary, and also on the DU Executive Council, he apparently stated something quite pointed.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
He reportedly said that even when you have eligible SCST candidates who are shortlisted,
Right.
many still end up being declared not suitable, which, directly implies it's not about a lack of qualified people. It suggests an intention to exclude.
So even making the shortlist isn't enough sometimes.
Apparently not, according to these claims. And there were even specific examples mentioned, like the Hindi department allegedly using NFS to block reserved posts meant for OBC's other backward classes.
Okay, so it might not just be limited to SCST candidates then. This NFS tag could be a broader tool.
That seems to be the implication, a way to potentially get around reservation policies across the board, perhaps.
Which brings us back to the core DTF argument. This isn't about merit or qualifications. It's about, potentially, a rigged system.
That's their contention, yes. That these rejections are a mechanism to bypass the mandated reservation policies. And again, that 70% figure, it makes you wonder. It's hard to explain away as just random chance.
So the parliamentary committee steps in. Remind us, what's their specific role in something like this? What kind of teeth do they have?
Well, their fundamental mandate is to look out for the welfare of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. They ensure constitutional safeguards are actually working.
Okay.
So when these DU teachers went to them on April 11th, they were appealing to a body with the power to investigate, to demand answers from the university, and to recommend action to the government.
And they didn't just show up and chat, right? There was a formal document involved.
Yes, a memorandum. That's key here. It laid out all these grievances formally, detailed the alleged misuse of NFS and NCS tags specifically as a way DU gets around reservation policies.
With evidence and personal accounts, presumably?
That's the idea, yes, to substantiate the claims of systemic issues.
Maybe we should quickly touch on reservation policies themselves. For context, these aren't just guidelines, are they?
Oh, absolutely not. They're embedded in the Constitution. They exist to counteract centuries of historical disadvantage and create, a more level playing field.
Right.
Currently, for central government jobs and institutions like DU, it's 15% reserved for scheduled castes, 7.5% for scheduled tribes. That applies to recruitment and promotions.
So these are legal requirements, mandatory.
Precisely. And the core accusation here is that DU is allegedly treating these mandates as, Well, optional, using NFS as the primary loophole.
That's a very serious charge. Saying they acknowledge the policy on paper, but use these vague rejections to get it in practice.
That's the essence of the teacher's argument, that these labels allow the university to maintain a facade of compliance while actually preserving a status quo where SCST representation remains low.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The memorandum also brought up something called the 200-point reservation roster. What is that and why is it relevant here?
Right, the roster. Think of it like an accounting system for reserved posts. It's meant to track vacancies over time to ensure that, overall, the required percentages for SCST candidates are met.
Makes sense. A tracking tool.
Yeah. But the teachers pointed to a problem stemming from a decision made back in 2013 by DU's Executive Council.
What happened in 2013?
They changed how vacancies were counted for applying this roster. Instead of looking at the university or even a whole college as a single unit, they started counting vacancies department by department.
Okay, that sounds like maybe an administrative detail, but you're saying it had bigger consequences.
Big consequences,
Yeah.
allegedly. Because if you look at a smaller department, they might only have 1 or 2 vacancies open up in a year.
Right.
Even if the university as a whole has a huge backlog of unfilled SCST posts, that small department might not hit the trigger point on the roster to have to fill a reserved slot in that specific recruitment cycle.
Ah, I see. So by breaking it down into smaller units, it makes it easier for individual departments to essentially say, well, this vacancy doesn't fall on a reserve point according to the roster right now.
Exactly. It allows for manipulation at that micro level. It means those backlog vacancies posts specifically meant for SEST candidates that haven't been filled can just keep piling up unfilled across the university.
That sounds like a classic bureaucratic loophole. Using the letter of the rule, maybe, to defeat the spirit of it?
That's certainly how the teachers seem to view it. And the memorandum didn't stop there. It also tackled the issue of college principals, these single cadre posts.
Single cadre, meaning there's only one principal per college, right?
Correct. And the allegation here is pretty stark. These posts have become, and I think the term they used was a reservation black hole.
A black hole, meaning
Meaning, despite there apparently being qualified SCST candidates available, they very, very rarely get appointed to these top leadership positions.
And is there a reason given for why this happens?
Well, one factor highlighted was the practice of reappointments. Incumbent principals getting their terms extended, sometimes multiple times.
Ah, so the same people stay in place, limiting opportunities for others.
That's the argument. The memorandum suggests this reinforces a potentially narrow, maybe even skewed idea of merit that consistently overlooks or excludes qualified SCST individuals who could bring different perspectives.
It definitely raises questions about leadership diversity and fresh thinking if the same faces remain for years and years.
It does, and it connects to this broader theme of how representation, or lack thereof, can shape an institution's culture and direction.
Okay, another layer to this seems to be the increasing use of temporary contracts at DU. Guest lecturers, contractual staff, especially in places like NCWEB and SOL.
Yes, that's a major point. The issue is that these temporary, non-permanent positions often exist outside the regular reservation roster system.
So they don't have to follow the same reservation rules.
Often, no. Or the rules are applied differently, or sometimes not at all. So as the university leans more heavily on these temporary roles.
It effectively shrinks the pool of permanent jobs where reservation is strictly mandated.
Exactly. It creates a kind of two-tiered faculty system, and the tier that's growing might be the one with weaker or non-existent reservation compliance.
And this extends even further down to outsourced jobs, like Class D roles, cleaning staff, security, that sort of thing.
Yes, the memorandum claimed that for these outsourced jobs, often the entry point for people from the most marginalized communities' reservation rules are frequently just ignored entirely.
Wow. So it impacts opportunities at almost every level.
It seems so. Anil Kumar, the DU Teachers Association's secretary, specifically highlighted how the recruitment for backlog vacancies has stalled, causing what he called chaos in the whole reservation system.
It sounds like a multi-pronged problem, undermining the policy from different angles. They also mentioned something about liaison officers. What's the issue there?
Right, liaison officers. These individuals are supposed to be the internal watchdogs, monitoring SCST welfare and reservation implementation within colleges.
Okay, sounds like a potentially useful role.
It should be. But the allegation is that they're often appointed by the college principals and essentially answerable to them.
Ah, So a potential conflict of interest.
A huge one. How effectively can you monitor or challenge the actions of the person who appointed you and potentially controls your career progression within the college?
Yeah, that doesn't sound very independent. Like asking the fox to report on hen security.
Pretty much. Anil Kumar, again, apparently called for these liaison officers to be truly independent, arguing against this inherent conflict. Someone not under the principal's thumb.
Makes sense. You need impartiality for oversight to mean anything. Now, beyond these sort of structural and procedural issues, did the teachers talk about other forms of difficulty, like harassment or lack of recognition?
Yes, that came up too. Professor Neelam, who is an academic council member, reportedly shared accounts of past mistreatment faced by SCST teachers. It suggests the problems aren't just about getting hired or promoted, but also about the day-to-day environment.
And she also raised some points about symbolism, right?
She did. She strongly advocated for reopening DU's dedicated SCST office, which apparently isn't functioning right now.
An office specifically for support and grievances.
Exactly. And she also pushed for all colleges to properly celebrate Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's birth anniversary.
Why is that symbolic recognition considered so important in this context? It might seem secondary to jobs and promotions.
But it's deeply significant. Dr. Ambedkar was the main architect of the Indian Constitution, a champion for social justice, particularly for marginalized communities. Okay. So for an institution like DU to actively acknowledge and celebrate his legacy, it sends a powerful message. It signals respect for the very principles underpinning equality and reservation. When that recognition is absent or half-hearted, it can feel like a subtle dismissal of those principles in the communities he fought for. It adds to a feeling of not quite belonging, you know?
That's a really important point. It's not just about the letter of the law, but the spirit of inclusion. So looking at the bigger picture, what are the broader implications if these allegations hold true, beyond just Delhi University?
Well, first, any form of systemic discrimination obviously hurts the individuals directly affected. But it also damages the institution itself. You're potentially sidelining talented, qualified people simply because of their background.
Which limits the pool of ideas and perspectives.
Absolutely. It hinders intellectual progress, innovation, everything that a university should foster. And it raises serious questions about accountability. The reports mentioned DU hadn't formally responded to these specific allegations as of April 11th. That silence itself can be concerning.
And this probably isn't just a DU issue, is it?
Likely not. Similar concerns about how effectively reservation policies are implemented pop up in discussions about academic institutions across India. It seems to be a recurring challenge.
And this brings us back to that word that always comes up in these debates, merit. How does the merit argument get used, or perhaps misused, in this context?
It's often positioned as the counterpoint, isn't it? The idea that reservation somehow compromises merit.
Right. We should hire the best person, regardless.
But what the allegations at DU challenge is the very definition of best, or at least how it's being applied. If, as claimed, 70% of shortlisted, presumably qualified, SCST candidates are deemed not found suitable.
Then it suggests the barrier isn't a lack of merit, but something else.
Exactly. It forces us to question. Is the system itself biased? Are the criteria used to judge merit inherently skewed? Or is there deliberate exclusion happening despite merit? The persistent underrepresentation, especially at senior levels, suggests that the simple meritocracy argument might be, well, a myth, or at least not the full story. It seems merit often ends up looking suspiciously like the people already in power.
A really critical point to consider. So, faced with all this, what did the teachers actually ask for? What solutions were proposed in that memorandum to the parliamentary committee?
They had some very specific demands. First and foremost, a thorough, transparent review of DU's entire recruitment and promotion process, especially focusing on how and why NFS and NCS are used.
Okay, accountability for those labels.
Definitely. They also demanded that the 200-point roster system be fixed urgently to stop departments from potentially gaming the system and avoiding filling reserved posts.
Closing that loophole we discussed.
Right, and extending reservation properly to all posts, including those single cadre principal positions. No more black holes.
And the temporary contracts.
Ensuring reservation policies are strictly applied there, too. No more bypassing the rules through contractualization, and crucially, reactivating that dedicated SCST office for support and grievance redressal.
Seems like a comprehensive set of demands aimed at systemic change. And the committee's response?
They reportedly promised to investigate further, which is, the expected first step.
But a promise isn't the same as action.
Exactly. Real change will likely need continued pressure, ongoing advocacy, and a genuine commitment from the university and government authorities to enforce accountability. It boils down to making those constitutional guarantees of equality and social justice a lived reality within the institution.
And as Professor Neelam highlighted, perhaps remembering the legacy of Dr. Ambedkar is a good starting point, a reminder of the fundamental principles at stake.
Absolutely. It grounds the whole discussion in the larger fight for social justice.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive into the situation at Delhi University as of April 11th, 2025, really throws up some profound questions, doesn't it? About fairness, opportunity, the very foundations of our public institutions.
It really does. The picture painted by those teachers before the parliamentary committee suggests that systemic issues, potentially masked by bureaucratic labels like not found suitable, might be actively hindering the progress of SCST academics.
That alleged 70% NFS&CS rejection rate for SCST candidates is just. It demands scrutiny. You have to ask, is it truly impossible to find suitable candidates from these communities 70% of the time? Or is something else driving those decisions?
And when you add in the allegations about manipulating the reservation roster, the lack of representation in top roles like principals, it certainly gives you pause. It suggests potential systemic flaws rather than just individual cases.
And like you said, this isn't just about one university. It potentially mirrors broader struggles across India's academic world in making equitable representation a reality, not just a policy on paper.
The calls for change from these teachers are loud and clear. They underscore a need for real accountability and a recommitment to the constitutional promise of reservation.
It leaves us with a pretty fundamental question to ponder, really. What does it signal about our systems when a large segment of a community, people with qualifications, feel systematically shut out? What are the long-term costs to education, to innovation, to society if we don't address these deep-seated issues of exclusion? This situation at DU really compels us to think critically about what merit truly means and who gets to define it.